and they do eventually possibly collect old hardware, old devices, big machines, if they have enough space. But this is more of a side effect of having a hackerspace. So what we could define a hackerspace as is a third room. I'm not sure if you heard about this expression before. It is used for a room that is not used to live in, and it is also not the place that you work at, but this is like your refugee camp. You go to a third room in your free spare time to do things, not just to go there to sleep, but to actually work on things that are not considered to be your job. And this can actually look very, very vastly differently in all sorts of spaces. So there's spaces that would mainly focus on hardware hacking, on hardware reverse engineering, on all sorts of electronic stuff from microcontrollers, but also the spaces where most of the people are being coders, programmers, also security engineers, script keys, partially. And then there are spaces that go more into the direction of digital art, that do all the shiny, blinky things, which are actually the spaces that get people most contagious, as we've seen. So what do we consider to be a hacker? Like space is pretty obvious. This is a non-temporary space where people can go at any time. They have the keys to the space. They can just work there on their projects. So by hacker, saying this here might sound a little funny, but we don't actually we don't actually have any boundaries in this field. Like, you could hack basically on anything. You could hack on literature if you wanted to. You can hack just by saying you're doing something, you're looking at other ways to make use of a specific device, you are rethinking the purpose of things, you're reinventing things, and basically that leads to the very common expression, at least in the German-speaking countries, that we say we're hackers, not slackers. Now this was a little bit about the European movement. How did this movement hit the United States? So some of you people might be familiar with the Chaos Communication Camp. I didn't mention this previously, but after the CCC moved to Berlin in '98, also the Chaos Communication Congress that would happen every year around December in Berlin moved there and grew a very, very big event. So every second year there's a camp happening. Every 4 years of this camp is happening in Berlin. And so in 2007, a bunch of US hackers decided to go on a little trip, on a tour to see this Chaos Communication Camp. And so they got on a plane, and this is actually known as the Hackers on a Plane 1.0 movement. Led with this group by a person called Nick Farr, also known as the Johnny Appleseed of Hackerspaces, and we might see in a second why this is the case. So these people go on a trip to Europe. For some of them, this is being the first time they ever visit Europe, and they are at the camp and they spend a couple of more days in Europe, because I mean, you're not just flying over for like half a week. So the plan was they were going on a road trip, visiting a couple of the German hackerspaces, also visiting the Metal Lab in Vienna. And for this trip, a couple of the hackerspaces would schedule lectures, or workshops, or talks, so that these visitors actually see what in these spaces is actually happening. Because these spaces are a lot about doing workshops together, not only just sitting there on your own hacking in what tends to be a group, but actually hacking on their own. And at the C4, at the Cologne Hackerspace, which is also a group that relates itself back to the to the CCC, a person called Jens Ohlig came up with a talk called the Hackerspace Design Patterns to kind of advertise the movement to the people that were visiting from the States. comes up is a lecture, a presentation, a PDF document that you can download pretty much anywhere called the Hackerspace Design Patterns. And Jens Olek himself said about this that this is not a cookbook, right? This is how we did this in Germany. This is what worked very well for us throughout the past, let's say, 20 years. But basically, this is just an idea. This is what might get you further. This is what could probably help you if you're worrying about specific ideas that tend towards building a hackerspace. And it's consisting of 5 main groups of hackerspace design patterns, which are about sustainability, which are about independence, regularity, conflict resolution, which is very, very important actually in a group of nerds, given the fact that nerds more than likely aren't the most socially capable people. This is also about creative chaos patterns. I have the document with me. I'm not going to go into this right now, but if we have more time in the end of the presentation, if anyone wants to have a look at it, I will more gladly share it. So yeah, basically, liest mir den Oleg, a saying that can't be translated into English that well, other than probably saying, read the fucking Oleg. It's like the document in Hackerspace's history. Now, I was mentioning this group of hackers, the hackers on the plane 1.0. They get back to the States, and what we haven't seen a hackerspace culture, a hackerspace movement before, other than, these single groups once in a while popping up somewhere. All of a sudden, we have a very, very strong movement. These people get incredibly inspired by what they've seen, and try to find other people that thought in a very similar way. And apparently there were a lot of these people, and they would come up with spaces that are flourishing nowadays. These being NYC Resistor, which has a very strong community aspect, or Noisebridge in San Francisco, which has a very, very strong aspect to it. They do a lot of coding in Python. Also Jake Applebaum, whom you might know, is involved in this group, and they focus on electronics and microcontrollers. And then we have HackDC, for instance. This being the space that Nick Farr founded right after they came back. And why did this all happen so fast is because the document that I was mentioning earlier also says that the time to start is now. So whatever possible worries you might have, or whatever excuses you could come up with, they're not really valid. We've seen this movement taking place in so many countries now, so many times, and it fails hardly ever. Of course, it's adapted to every single space that there is. So, like, the community may change, but the base idea of having a space where you would go to share your ideas of projects, to speak with people about it, to get inspired by the work of other people, and more often than not, to ask a question that will always be answered by somebody because you have all actual specialists there. This is the base idea of these hackerspaces. To make this all easier, we came up with a project, or with a website, or with a service called hackerspaces.org. This all started as a wiki page where we would list all existing hackerspaces that we know of. Of course, we're knowing that there might be more all around the world that actually don't want to be that official or public. But we tried to connect these hackerspaces outside of Germany that were not really in touch with the CCC, to not have them repeat the same mistakes over and over again, to take a little bit of that burden from them that would be created by having to find a space, having to manage community problems.